Thank you so much. And first and foremost, good morning, everybody. And thank you also to Hedayah, the partners and the sponsors, for having us here all the way from across the big pond. First and foremost, can I have the next slide? You got the title already. We're talking about, oh, thank you. That's right. Oh, thank you, whoever did that. First and foremost, just a very short overview of sort of what got us to this point. Many of you know sort of the history of the fall of ISIS, Beguz as the last standpoint of ISIS stronghold, so I'm not going to really get into that, but the main theme here is women and children in the camps in Syria, which has now translated into funding campaigns online. So, as we will be talking about, our methodology is, first and foremost, I do want to mention, actually, this is an ongoing project, and these are preliminary findings. We will have greater, stronger findings in our report for Hedayah coming up probably next year, because it's due in December. But yes, our methodology includes primary English source language channels, and all of this is geared towards the camps in Syria. So there are many accounts online on different platforms that are specifically geared towards the camps, women and children. We have a snowballing sample as far as collecting data, and it is all qualitative narratives that we are looking at. I will pass the next part of the methodology on to Meili.
So the sources include 7 Telegram channels. There's also ongoing collection on Instagram, and hoping to also get that to around 7, perhaps more. And then there is one specific source on Tech Haven, Rocket Chat, which is actually dedicated only to and specifically about the camps. And then also we are including some additional data, which are magazine releases, which focus on narratives about the camps, and they also have are including in these magazines alleged personal testimonies from women who are currently in these camps and recalling the Battle of Baghouz, for example. So some of the qualitative coding process, this is the primary methodology we're using. The unit of analysis is focused on individual message posts. We're IDing common narrative themes that are woven throughout these narratives when you look at them all together. And then we're also, after this process, we are refining the narrative theme categories and then going into a more in-depth examination of each code and how that relates to the ultimate goal of fundraising activities. So why does this matter? Because again, like a lot of these also, it's worth stating that there's the fear in pro-IS spaces that some of these could be scams. So with this, caveat that, it's hard to verify for sure, is this a real fundraising channel? Is it a scam channel? But the important takeaway is that it's trying to give the appearance of being legitimately connected to IS in a more low-key way, I should state too, by the way, just so they don't get taken down off Telegram and banned. But anyway, so why does this matter? It matters to develop more in-depth understandings about pro-IS propaganda narratives. There's been a lot of excellent research and data collection on fundraising flows coming allegedly from the camps, and the types of things they're using, like Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies, PayPal, GoFundMe, for example. But there hasn't really been much in way of examining the narratives that they're using to galvanize support for individuals in the camps and the fundraising activities. So this is the gap that we're hoping to fill. So also we're contextualizing content from and about the camps within the wider framework of IS propaganda messaging. How does this former propaganda support these narratives? And how are these narratives drawing basically from a well-established body of literature, so to speak, that was developed at the height of the so-called territorial caliphate back in like 2015, 2016. So ultimately, we hope to provide policymakers with an overview of how these pro-IS ecosystems operate, and then better inform them how to disrupt fundraising efforts that would include and incorporate counter-narrative messaging alongside the disruption of the actual campaigns going on, raise awareness about a wide array of narratives being used to promote the fundraising, and finally to understand how narratives might vary from platform to platform.
So this slide is just images from some of these accounts. We see a lot of documentation of so-called money that has been provided to individuals in the camps. So we see a lot of photographs that sort of show people have donated as a way of encouraging others to donate. We also see a lot of letters written from either women or children within the camps, and then we see a lot of drawings that are allegedly drawn by the children within the camps. So this is all ways to sort of pull at the heartstrings of individuals that are following these channels and accounts. So prominent narratives, we have a number. A lot of these also fit into some of the narratives that we see in general IS propaganda. So victimization, of course, first and foremost. We have a lot of stories or narratives that focus on the devastation of the camps, the bad living conditions, which, I mean, we all know that the camps are really horrible places to live in. Steadfastness against adversaries, very strong pro-IS resonating messages that we've seen throughout the conflict in Syria and with pro-IS propaganda. Gender guilt tripping or using narratives that want to include people in either a fight or providing money is very common within IS narratives again, and the gender guilt tripping is more geared towards these channels that really do focus on women and children. I do want to make a caveat about the religious citations and justifications. We do know that IS uses religion and religious etiquette that are really not Islam, but they're hijacking the religion to use it for their own purposes. So I just want to be very clear on that. This is not Islam as religion. This is Islam interpreted by pro-IS accounts. But we always see a lot of posts that are associated with the Islamic State and especially with the camps, using passages from the Quran or passages that seem religious to sort of push those that are more pious to being a part of this. You can really equate it to going to church where they're raising donations as well, and they are using religious wording to try to get you to donate to your faith. The innocence of children, of course, children, once again, pull at our heartstrings. And so they use these narratives and also the images from children. A lot of the drawings we see tend to focus on the devastation that children have witnessed or psychological issues to do with airstrikes and so forth. I don't want to go through the whole list because we only have a limited amount of time, but we do want to mention that imagery-based messaging is a very strong point in these channels and chats because images are worth 1,000 words, so to speak. And then usually we see an image and someone will sort of provide an explanation of it, especially when it has to do with children or women. And then there will be a request to donate. We also have, as Meili mentioned, in some of the magazines that are geared towards prisoners, we have first-hand accounts from testimonies of women and children. There's one magazine that has a whole article so-called written by a child and their experience from Begus into the camp. And it's a very sad story, but when you read it, it really, it's not written by a child, it's too advanced. Whether someone maybe translated it into more adult language, that's another thought, but a lot of this really does come across as propaganda, so we need to remember that. This is a great post, actually. Oops, excuse me. This is a great fundraising post that shows examples of pro-IS accounts using very common fundraising tactics that we see even with real legit fundraising orgs for humanitarian purposes. I mean, I love the entrance of like, your money can go towards medicine and clothing and diapers and basic food. So they really do use common marketing tactics that we see with any group that is trying to raise money. So we do know that ISIS and many extremist groups use marketing tactics. So marketing theory is a really good thing to look at when you're considering fundraising campaigns for any extremist groups. Meili, I will pass this on to you.
So about online fundraising, the thing is it can be quite hard to track because the language they use is trying to obscure, as Chelsea had said, by masquerading it as a humanitarian effort. So if there's no direct IS connection, it can be hard to say, okay, we can prove without a doubt this is terrorist fundraising and we can take this down. So that's a really big problem for moderators on different platforms that they're facing, especially with the rampant nature that these fundraisers are spreading across social media sites, across platforms. So how exactly are they kind of getting away with this? Well, on Telegram, there are heavy usage of bots. Back then, like maybe back in 2018 and before, or yeah, sorry, not 2018, 2019, after the fall of Baghouz in 2020, they would post the direct Bitcoin links, and they would put it in the channels. You could see it directly, like, hey, if I want to donate, here's the link. I can go right to it and do that. But because they know they are being watched now, what they think is an extra layer of security is including the for a bot or perhaps an account, and they're asking people to contact this individual, and then from there they'll say, we'll share the link directly, but you have to contact us first. So there are concerns, that this could be scams, but that's why on these channels they're saying contact us, but then they're including these they're including a heavy usage of imagery to prove that it is not a scam. Also, some campaigns are frequently changing donation addresses, especially for like Western Union, Bitcoin. Sometimes they change it around a bit, so they're becoming more aware that they are being tracked, and they're trying to employ countermeasures, whether that's to avoid content moderation or to avoid even the tracking of the fundraising flows. Awesome. And then this is just a graphic showing how the money moves, and it's from TRM Labs, and it's a good graphic representation of the strategizing online, and how they are transferring these the methods that they're using to transfer fundraising efforts. And can just leave that up for a bit.
Yeah,
take a look.
And I will say it does also represent what we're seeing from our observations in our project here. So some of the takeaways, first and foremost, as Meili mentioned, language and imagery and emotional cues are a huge thing when it comes to trying to raise funds for the camps. It's all about emotions. And as we know, emotional messages resonate very well with audiences. So it's a really strong tactic to get people to be a part of fundraising one way or another, whether it's sending goods or actual money. And we see, like I said, a lot of images of money, currency from across the world with messages saying this is for you and thank you and so forth. Marketing tactics, as I mentioned, similar to most fundraising campaigns that we see across spectrums, not just extremist groups, and similar other pro-ISIS content fundraising messages. They're also disseminated across multiple languages. Like, we pretty much just looked at the English languages, but there are accounts that are in many different languages, which is a common tactic of ISIS propaganda in general. We do want to make a caveat in the sense of direct messaging. Meili mentioned it slightly earlier and when she was talking about how funds are transferred, but especially on platforms like Telegram, the direct messaging is probably the most secure messaging there could be on that platform. We've seen it used in the past during actual ISIS attacks, especially those in England. So when someone asks to provide money and it goes to direct messaging, it pretty much goes dark after that.
Oh, sure, I think that's, yeah. And so I guess like money transfers are again conducted across platform, and then the ramping the usage of cryptocurrency, they're viewing this right now as being the most secure. But it's interesting because they still continue to use Western Union, and then a special note about fundraising that appears to be coming from Central Asian countries as well as from Russia. They seem to rely on, they're using a lot of Russian bank accounts actually for that. So it's just kind of an interesting conglomeration of methods that they're using for these fundraising efforts. And as we've seen, it does vary regionally, whether like more generic, that seems to be geared towards like audiences in Europe and North America versus, from Central Asia perhaps, or from Russia, and you see a variety of tactics that they are using.
Yes, and we just want to also mention that the way funds are transferred, it is very much a cross-platform method. So it starts out off on one platform where people are providing the images, and as you see, the image of the horse is allegedly drawn by a child in the camps, but they use the imagery or the messaging on a platform, whether it's Telegram, Rocket Chat, etc., and then that maybe goes to a private message to actually talk about transfers of funds, and then we get the cross-platform aspect of where the funds are going through, or going through Western Union or blockchain, or the millions of different ways that money is transferred in these cases. Policy suggestions, this is the big part, of course. First and foremost, the funds that are allegedly going to humanitarian purposes, as Meili mentioned, we can't verify that they are not going to individuals in the camps, but there's a high likelihood that a lot of this is funding terrorism in some shape or form. We saw this earlier on at the heyday of ISIS. There were accounts that were for fundraising for actual terrorist purposes. Luckily, Telegram and other platforms took those down fairly quickly, but they were up for a while. And we saw similar tactics that are used for the camps in those fundraising campaigns as well. Until the camps are closed, these types of campaigns and these types of accounts and fundraising will be a common thing. It is pretty much a game of cat and mouse when it comes to ISIS and the many different platforms they use and the many different ways they try to raise funds.
So some ways that could be used to, in terms of policy suggestions, to kind of counteract it is perhaps there could be engagement through mock donations of small amounts, and then tracking the funds and following the money to see where these flows are going. Also, technology providers should continue to detect, disrupt, and mitigate pro-IS fundraising. And then especially for platforms, they should be aware of the way that IS individuals are keeping these campaigns going. So if it's knocked down on Telegram, quite often they'll say, if this campaign goes down, we have a backup channel on Telegram, but we also have a backup channel on, for example, Instagram or Facebook. And then they'll pre-provide these links, and so all the audience members who are watching the channel, they'll know immediately to go over to Instagram and kind of pick up where they left off, and then they'll say on Instagram, if this goes down, come back to Telegram. So it's just kind of playing a game of tag, running through all the platforms. And so platforms should be really aware of how this cross-platform activity is happening, and partner across with each other to track maybe like a one campaign that could be spread across like 3-4 platforms, for example. Also, they should be aware of how the fundraising efforts can vary across platforms. So like Instagram, of course, it'll be more image-based, but on Telegram, you might get more in-depth textual narratives, especially the alleged first-hand accounts.
And also another really interesting point that is very important to policymakers is that these accounts really do not post things that they know are going to get flagged by content moderation or any of the AI technology we have to flag extremist content. So they really do stay away from anything that is going to be violent imagery, incitement of violence. So they really do focus more on the humanitarian, women and children side. So it can be hard for content moderators and tech companies to detect these accounts. So the only thing I can say is they have to stay vigilant in other ways by kind of knowing the context and the content and what is being taken placed with it. So. And thank you. If you have any questions, these are our contact emails at American University. And once again, thank you so much to Hedayah for having us.